Raising the Wind by Robert Aickman. Read by Tim McInnerny. A man I know named Philbrick makes his living by navigating boats from one place to another on behalf of their owners. Philbrick and I were at school together. I went on to Oxford, and since then I am supposed not to have done too badly on Lloyd's. All the same, I often envy Philbrick. His life's his own, he sees a lot of the world. Furthermore, I am sure he does surprisingly well financially. The people who own fair-sized boats nowadays have no time to be aboard them, and always want the boat to be somewhere else than they have to be. That's when Philbrick comes on the scene. I've put quite a few jobs in his way myself, and one job of that kind, punctually carried through, soon leads to others. Of course, it's different if the boat goes to the bottom, as in the case I'm about to tell you. This time, Philbrick had to bring a Thames barge from a small port in East Anglia to a lonely spot on the Thames estuary, where the new owner had acquired a tidal mooring, at which he was proposing to convert the barge with his own hands at weekends. It was a matter of bringing the barge round the coast under sail. She had been laid up for a long time, and there was no question of fitting an engine. The new owner was simply going to use her as a residence, and had no idea of her ever going to sea again. So I dare say I was among the first that Philbrick thought of to lend a hand with the job. One trouble was that the impatient young bridegroom-to-be had put in the letter of agreement, which Philbrick always insisted upon, a precise date of delivery, and there wasn't much time. Nonetheless, it should only have taken a single weekend, and I offered Philbrick the choice of 2 consecutive ones. Of course, there is no question of money passing, at least where I am concerned. I helped Philbrick out as a friend, or just for the hell of it. When the time came, I could manage only the second weekend, and on the Friday night I drove down to the small East Anglian port. I noticed that near Mark's Tay the rooks were making curious patterns in the sky, but I thought little of it. The barge was named Dorothea. Philbrick had been camping out in her for well over a week. Curiously enough, he was miffed by my late arrival, and unhelpful with the rations, tired though I was. This was most unlike the man I knew. Fortunately, I had brought a dozen bottles of Scotch, and a bottle or 2 of Irish as well. Outside it was pitch black and stifling, and very smelly. "Hadn't we better pray for a wind?" I asked. "It's gone on like this all the time I've been here," said Philbrick, pouring down about half a tumbler of whisky. "It's almost too hot to raise a sail," I said. Of course, the big sail on a barge is heavy to handle. "If we don't get going tomorrow, I shall be liable for damages," said Philbrick. "Bloody little Raby baby insisted on it." I did know that the man's name was supposed to be Raby. Not a good omen, I'd thought. Too like rabid. The business of the damages worried me all night. It somehow brought to mind the coffin ships which used to be sent to sea in order to sink with all below-decks personnel, so that the insurance might be collected fraudulently. Of course, I am in insurance. In any case, I have seldom passed a more objectionable night. In addition to everything else, there were rats and other vermin, and Philbrick appeared to be suffering virtual DTs. His state went far beyond anything I had known of him before. In the morning, it was as bad as ever. A sky like copper, and not a leaf stirring before the zephyr. Philbrick started railing away as soon as I appeared, and I quickly realized that it was not merely the matter of the grotesque liability for damages, but something that was much nearer home. The odd thing was that though I could not quite name it, yet it had undoubtedly affected me too. I have to admit that I began answering Philbrick back, and with interest. Suddenly the 2 of us stopped. We had both spotted an old woman who stood on the bank watching us. Not laughing at us, not frightened of us, as well she might have been, just watching us. She was thin as a poker, had very little hair on her bare head, was dressed in nothing I could name, apart from a little scarf round her neck, which was in bright red. Her eyes were very unpleasant, as the eyes of old people sometimes are. "Do you wish to raise the wind?" she asked. This question came in a thin, upward-straining pipe. Suppose we do, rejoined Philbrick.
"Come with me to the church," said the old woman, still standing narrow and motionless. "It will cost you almost nothing."
"All right," I called across to her, upon impulse. "I may as well see what happens," I expounded to Philbrick. "We've nothing else to do anyway, not until there's a breeze." Philbrick stared at me. Then he put his hand on my arm. "Don't be an utter fool, old man," he said. "I'm not suggesting that you bother," I replied, "but I propose to see this through. It can hardly take long." The little church stood entirely alone amid the still meadows. The old woman settled to business at once. She went eagerly before me up the path to the porch and opened the church door. Today, of course, it would have to be kept locked, especially in so remote a place, where thieves would have time without end to strip everything. Then she told me what to do. I was to kneel outside the closed door, while she, having shut the door, was to kneel on the other side of it, within the church. When she blew through the big keyhole, I was to blow back, and so on, alternately, rhythmically, steadily. I had feared that the breath of the old woman might be fairly unpleasant, but the curious thing was that it came at me through the keyhole as sweetly as the breath of a young cherub. She blew, and I blew. We continued in turns until, just as the ache in my knees was becoming beyond bearing, I became aware first of noises in the church. Then, in no time at all, there was a very steady noise indeed. The tumult was such that I couldn't even think properly. I wondered what had happened to the old woman in the middle of it. Up to a point, she was, after all, my responsibility. I struggled to my feet and tried to open the church door. I needn't have worried. The door was locked. At first I thought that the devil himself had probably locked it, but it then struck me as more likely that my aged friend had merely turned the key. It is quite common for the church key to be kept on the inside of the door during the day. I subsided onto one of the stone benches and began to rub my knees more systematically while trying to decide what to do next. But after 2 or 3 minutes the door opened and the old woman's bald head was stuck out round the edge of it, like Mr. Punch's head round the corner of the booth. "I forgot the bottle," she squealed. "Have you an empty bottle?" "I've got several," I said. "Bring the biggest." She drew her head in and stuck her very long hand out instead. I tottered off as best I could. When I returned to the porch, I passed the bottle to the long hand, which still protruded. The hand snatched it, and the door shut on the instant. The uproar was just the same, or perhaps worse, and I could imagine that speed could well be of the essence. From that moment, the noise steadily abated. In 2 or 3 minutes, if that, all was timeless peace again. The old woman took her time before making her reappearance. Then she hustled out with my bottle in her hand. "I had to keep you waiting while I sealed it," she explained solemnly, and held out the top of the bottle for me to see. It appeared to me to have been sealed with some liturgical preparation. I looked in through the open door. The entire church was in the most utter chaos. Everything upset, and a terrible amount torn and broken. It was a shocking sight. And there was also the most peculiar and offensive odour. "What's in that bottle?" I asked. "What do you think?" she responded. She slammed the church door shut and we returned to the barge. Much to my surprise, Philbrick had pulled himself together somewhat and was sitting on the deck in a clean shirt, surrounded by Pepsi-Cola cans. "Tuppence halfpenny," squeaked the old dear, holding out the bottle but not letting go of it. "Alas, there's no such sum any longer," I said, and gave her a £1 note. She released the bottle as if the neck of it had been red hot, whereupon I quickly found that red hot was exactly what the neck of the bottle was. The old girl shoved my £1 down her front like the heroine in a 19th century play. I twisted my handkerchief round the neck of the bottle and stepped aboard. I held the bottle up to the light. I could see nothing whatever in it. Certainly there was no liquid in it. "Here," I called after the old woman. "What exactly do we do with it?"
"Push yourselves off first, and then open it," she piped back. "Bon voyage."
Yes, she actually said those words as she stumbled away up the slope. Curiously enough, Philbrick attempted nothing in the way of argument. He helped me to get the sail up, ridiculous though it seemed in that dead-still air. No doubt it was anything at all to avoid paying those damages. We stood for a moment looking at the dirty big brown sail, as if the two of us were in a dream. Then I knocked off the neck of the bottle with a spike. The barge shuddered all over in a way I had never before experienced with any craft. Then we were out in the centre of the creek and moving steadily towards the open sea. The following breeze was as soft and scented as May Day. Philbrick sprang to take the wheel, and in less than no time we were bowling southward on the almost flat ocean. Naturally, we were looking at one another in a wild surmise, as the poet puts it, but I have never in all my life known a sweeter sail, or, I suppose, a swifter. By that same evening we had reached the big estuary, and through the glasses could make out Southend Pier. Philbrick had resumed his heavy drinking some time before, and unfortunately was missing some of the best atmospheric effects as the sun began to sink. I cannot pretend that I didn't see Philbrick's point, though on me the effect of it all was the opposite. I felt that I should never touch liquor of any kind again. But it seemed not to matter much whether the man at the wheel was drunk or sober. The whole experience could not have come to an end more suddenly or dramatically. As we were standing off the spot where the man Raby hoped to set about his work of happiness, there was a single pulverizing crash, exactly as if it had still been wartime, and both Philbrick and I found ourselves spinning through the air. There was also a single, extremely bright and multicoloured flash, which quite filled the universe, as by now it was almost dark, and there was an utter reek of suffocating sulphur. Philbrick and I fell into the much-contaminated Thames. We swam to the bank fairly easily. Philbrick, I remembered at that point, had been in the School 8 for one term. Unfortunately, the Dorothea was in pieces and completely beyond salvaging. That was one Thames barge the less. So far, the lawyers I recommended to Philbrick have been successful in saving him from the damages. In any case, the damages were in the event of late delivery. And we were not late. Raising the Wind by Robert Aickman was read by Tim McInnerny and produced by Karen Rose. It was a Sweet Talk production for Radio 4 Extra.